Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on.
Welcome to the Americanist Perspective. My name is Hal Shurtleff, and this is the 50th episode of our program, which has been airing on public access in Framingham for about 5 years now, between Dan Giro, the former host, and myself. We're very pleased that we've been doing this for 5 years. So it's our golden anniversary, 50 programs. We have to do another 50 at least. We have some interesting guests on today, and I'm going to introduce them very shortly, but I want to read something that was handed to me by one of my guests, a memo dated June 1st, 1993 from Steve Wilson, Governor's Wells Aid on the Reform Act, states, for a $5 billion price tag to be paid out over 7 years, we are buying very little real reform. We are simply pumping money into a failed structure with a little tinkering, some good and some bad, around the edges. Children in our worst systems, especially in the bureaucratic inner city systems, will continue to be denied a basic education in productive lives. And this is referring to the Massachusetts Education Reform Act of 1993. And with that, I'd like to introduce my two guests, Lydia Clapp and Aziza Nales, both from the inner city, so-called, in Boston. And they are what would be called today activists. We're simply concerned parents, but because too many parents are not concerned about what's going on, it's a novelty when parents become active. So I want to welcome you to my program, or to our program, and you belong to this organization, and it's a mouthful, Mad Massachusetts Mothers Network on Education Reform.
Exactly.
How do you say that fast 3 times?
Mad
really
Mass Mothers Network on Educational Reforms.
Well, I want to welcome you to the program. I'm very that you could make it. We discussed before the program, we were discussing a lot of things in general, and I want to ask you a question, and what I'm posing to both of you, your opinion of the state of public education in the inner city. Lydia, you can go first, and then you can follow up.
It's a system that constantly needs our vigilance as parents who have children involved there. A lot of children are there because their parents want them in the public school system. They say, why would you want that? Because somehow over the space of time we found a way that it can work for our children, but only with much involvement on our part. So it's something that we don't feel that we should have to abandon because it isn't that great. I'm going to say it isn't that great. It needs a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Money, Band-Aids haven't worked in the past, but it's something that with our vigilance, we still have hope that we can produce productive children from.
And my piece is the academics. I'm very, very concerned with our children being able to compete in the global world that we're now moving towards fastly. That our children will not have the proper math, even to our children even in Latin. Let's say, Latin Academy, are they going to be able to compete? And then you come on down to maybe a school like the Jeremiah Burke, which lost its accreditation, and you're wondering, what is the academics? How are these children? It's really, really upsetting for me when I run into a child that doesn't understand why we need to vote. So that means that they're not teaching civics. I had a young girl at the polls come up to me, and she couldn't be no more than 18, and she says, oh, I need to vote. I said, well, where do you live? She says, well, I live down Dudley. I said, well, I don't have time to take you down there. And she said, well, will y'all be here tomorrow? And everybody started laughing. I seen that as a child that did not have civics in school. I see a lot of pockets that are being purposely left out of the academic learning of our children.
You mentioned civics. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, there was an article in the Boston Herald how a teacher in one of the schools, I believe, it may have been Madison Park, one of the schools, the high schools in Boston. The teacher was using cartoons, political cartoons, to teach civics. And of course, they were all slanted towards a certain perspective, which is to the left. And I thought I'd add a little spice to that, and I contacted the teacher. I sent him a whole batch of conservative type or right-wing extremists, however you want to call it, cartoons. And I also sent them to the newspaper, the Boston Comic News, which has changed names. I forget what it's called now. And I spoke to the teacher, and he was very glad that he got these. And he said that this is the only way I can get these students interested, through cartoons. And in a way, he should be commended, but in a way, the system showed that, well, they should be learning perhaps the Constitution, learning, I remember, and I went to a Boston school, and it was technically an inner-city school. We had memorized the Declaration of Independence, and the heck with our self-esteem. If we couldn't memorize it, we didn't pass.
Right.
The Gettysburg Address. And it wasn't, you know, 25 Gettysburg Street. It was the speech that Lincoln gave, and it was quite a stirring speech. We had to memorize that, and I'm sure when you went to school, that you got to do the same thing.
The children are being shortchanged. I mean, taking computers into the classroom, you know, calculators, you know, they're using them, you know, to calculate instead of using their minds.
So if the batteries are down, then they're out of luck.
Or you have to lay it in the sun and
Oh, right, I had a solar
ones.
Yeah, and of course there was no lights, and then we were out of luck.
But at the same time, you know, I'm saying that Sam Bloomfield, certain phonetic responses, like they'll never learn the way that the system is right now with the whole language. They will never learn the right phonetic responses to read very well, because they won't know how to break that word down in the sounds and the syllables to be able to read new words. You know, only the words that they have learned in the whole language learning.
Words that they memorize.
Memory.
Like they were pictures.
Exactly. And this is another piece that bothers me, because when our children, when our children go to college, they have to set up reading clinics to help them read. That is another burden on the college, because those children should be prepared by the time they get to college, you know. And their SAT scores. I mean, I have a problem with that too. I would like to see equity in the school systems of America. You know what I'm saying? Very much like in West Africa, where you have equity. You have 3 children on 3 different streets that can come together and do their homework. You see? If you have kids that's learning different things all the time, you know, in the 5th grade, let's say they're in the 5th grade, every 5th grader should be learning the same thing. But when they come together from 3 different schools and 3 different streets, they can actually do their homework together. Kids learn better from children. But the way they have the system set up now, there's no equity.
Well, it's interesting that I'm involved with a summer camp, and I have a lot of high school, and half the kids come from public school backgrounds. There's a lot of the class struggle, not the Marxist concept, but the classroom concept. If you're an 8th grader, I don't talk to you if you're a 7th grader. At peer pressure. And that was instilled with this educational system that we've adopted, which is really the Prussian system. Years ago, the old schools where you had all the kids in one school, and you had 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds interacting pretty well together, where you didn't have that peer pressure. And now, of course, that was instilled. You did mention about standards. Well, my oldest daughter goes to a Catholic school in Dedham. Actually, it's in West Roxbury. And I would say that if you put her with any public school student in her same grade, she's probably 2 years ahead, academically, intellectually. And why is that? And of course, it's a little less expensive to send her to that school. We're still paying, you know, pay taxes to public schools. What are they doing right that they're doing wrong in the public schools?
Right.
And it doesn't make any difference, black, white. The black students in that school are still achieving that better level.
Right.
So why are they doing something? What are they doing right that we're doing so wrong in the public schools? The Boston Herald, and this is, of course, this is in February of '97, for those of you who might be watching this program 5 years from now, but of course this will hopefully be a timeless show. The Boston Herald, it was just 2 days ago, had articles about whole language and look-say and phonetics. And here's Tom Penzant, I think pronouncing his name correctly. Pezant. He is saying, yeah, maybe we ought to get into this this phonetics hey guy, you know, it's been 35 years since we've been telling you these things, you're finally waking up. But in my opinion, it's just there's so much pressure, thanks to parents like you two ladies and other parents that are around the country that are putting pressure on the school system. Finally, they're saying, okay, let's relieve the pressure. Let's throw a bone to them. We'll say, oh yeah, we're wrong. We're going to go to phonetics. Don't count on it. Don't count on it, because they have a vested interest in this whole language. The Massachusetts Education Reform Act of 1993 mandated whole language.
Yes.
And that was passed, as your little notes say, on emergency session. There was no emergency, but they had to get this thing through. They didn't want the parents to oppose it. And how many parents in this audience that are listening and watching this program even knew that this was happening?
Exactly.
You know, in Boston, we had question 3, which dealt with, should we reestablish an elected school committee? Well, we hear so much about this word democracy. So democracy, we need democracy. Well, but we're not going to have an appointed school. We're not going to have an elected school committee because we don't want the parents to have that much power. And it was wonderful that those in the black community were very much against this appointed school committee, and the establishment was, of course, in favor of it.
$800,000 were for favor.
A lot of money went into that. Yes, a lot of money went into that.
$800,000 were for favor.
Vote yeah or vote no on question 3.
No.
They were so afraid of a few parents asserting their responsibilities and their rights, and of course the whole theory that parents are the primary teachers. The teachers that we hire are nothing but our hirelings to inculcate and instill educational academic knowledge that obviously we can't teach our kids math and English and geography if we're making a living.
Right.
That doesn't mean we aren't primary teachers. And of course I'm a big advocate of the homeschool movement, where parents do indeed teach their kids English and geography and do it a much better job. The expectation of those in inner city schools. We've heard a lot. I read Malcolm X's autobiography. I'm not a fan of his, but I read when he was going to school, and he was a brilliant student in Omaha, Nebraska. He was told that he could only be whatever, some type of labor or a ditch
he could
digger.
never be a lawyer.
And this is back in the 50s, and actually no, probably the 40s when he was in school.
Yeah.
And we see that today now in all the schools with a school to work. But you told me of your own experiences. You were going to your guidance counselor, and you went to the Woburn School, the Metco program, I understand.
No, I lived in Woburn.
You lived in Woburn, okay.
You know, and the reason I lived in Woburn is because my father got tired of fighting the Boston public school system with 3 children and decided that I'm going to leave the city and go to another school system. Hopefully it will be better.
A little better.
But what we found there was not the case, because the children of immigrant parents that were warehoused a certain way, if their father was a laborer or had a certain calling, those children were put in that certain categories.
Lumped together.
You know, and the guidance counselors had a lot to do with that, and you weren't even allowed to take certain courses, and my father had to fight to get me in certain courses. I mean, he had another fight out there that he didn't think he would have, because, you know, he thought that there would be more equity in the education, because at that time, Jonathan Kozol had come out with his first book, Death at an Early Age. And my father said, see, I told you this. Let's get out of here.
What your father knew
it would be better, but
was confirmed
in
by
the 12th grade, I was told by my high school guidance counselor, he says, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, that's how we kind of opened up the conversation. I said, well, I'm going to be a nurse, you know, and I was flatly told to abandon the thought, because, you know, I hadn't had certain college programs. I don't have this and I don't have that. I never liked to be told what I didn't have, because I was always told I had everything I needed to succeed in life.
So
because I had loving parents, and I had, you know, so to be flatly told, abandon the thought, you know, I was devastated.
It was squashed. Your dreams and aspirations were squashed
but
by
I
the
studied hard.
system.
I studied hard in school, and I will study hard to do it, to be what I want. But see, it's not a matter of being what you want. Sometimes it doesn't matter what school system you're in.
It's what they want you to be.
Right.
Yeah, you get I don't know what you would call it, but it goes on out there too, you know.
Well, how many children in the inner city has been told these sort of things, and told that their dreams and aspirations because of their academics would not ever be realized. And this has been part of the problem that has pushed our communities into such turmoil as we see on TV a great deal. When you take a child, and this is my theory, has nothing to do with anyone else, but the way that, from my own research, when I take a child and dumb them down,
Deliberately dumb them down, okay? And of course you see the world at large, and even if I'm dumbing this child down, this child has his own mind. And then I don't even let this child realize that he's being dumbed down, you know, and he thinks he's learned everything he's supposed to have learned. Then when he goes down to John Hancock, and they put the test in front of him, and he doesn't even know where to start with this test. Then you come back home with your tail tucked, you know, and you're saying, gee, I thought I learned something. And you get home and you run into somebody on the corner, let's say a drug dealer. Say, well, man, what you doing? You know what I'm saying? Okay. Oh, next thing you know, this child is into drugs. You understand? And then the next step is turf. And then the next step is what? Guns. You understand? Because this is the way that style of life is. Our mission as mad mass mothers is to make sure that our children get a good education. So when they go to John Hancock, they can come home with a big smile on their face. Oh, I got a B+. Oh, I got an A+. Oh, I got an A. That's how you build the self-esteem and clean up ghettos. And another thing I want to talk about is the violence that is happening. I mean, we got so many children in prison today. We want to privatize our prisons and have a new form of slavery. You know what I'm saying? It's already going on.
And it's already going on.
Yeah.
Making Lexus parts in prisons and have the price of Lexus come down. I think it raised up. Now, you take for every prisoner that is making Lexus parts in that prison, they are saving $17 to, well, let's say from at least $15 to $17 on every hour.
Every hour of labor.
Of labor. Sure. Because they have to pay those people big money. You know, I see a new whole system emerging out of this new world order type of thinking, and this new kind of, I mean, when the president came and said, well, the violence has stopped, well, I think they want them all in prison now.
That's what a speechwriter said.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think they just want them in prison now. They don't want them dead. They want them in prison, you know? And I mean, this prison population is going to become very big because from what I hear from 2020, they're building 20 new prisons to be privatized for the Fortune 500 companies.
Isn't that something? It's really startling.
It is.
And we're so obsessed with O.J. Simpson and all these other foolish, and I shouldn't say foolish, but not not front page story every single day for 2 years.
Now, you know who they should have had on for every day for every 2 years? Let it be known, Oklahoma bombing.
That's right.
Now, if I was going to choose a trial to follow, it would have been the Oklahoma bombing. Over 100 people killed.
160 or so killed, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And we hear very little about what's going on with that. We hear it, but not the way, it's very little compared to the O.J. Simpson trial.
As soon as they start uncovering that there was some government complicity or maybe even some involvement, then it's a non-story.
Right.
Get it out of the newspapers.
Cut it off. Right. O.J. Simpson's trial, I just wanted to say, I believe is just a distraction, because during the time when they was passing a lot of these bills, they had O.J. Simpson on, and I'd also like to say, to respect to the president, I think that they demean the president's office by putting the O.J. Simpson verdict up during the presidential address. Now, I don't care what media came out saying that that was, you know, okay, and that the people, I disapproved. I want that counted. I disapprove it. I think that they demean the presidency's address by doing that.
We want to discuss a little bit about parental rights. We have about 8 or so minutes left.
Okay.
The DSS, Department of Social Services in Massachusetts, and other states that go by other acronyms, You've said that the heavy hand of DSS has come down in the black communities.
Yes.
Give me a little historical background and why. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, you see, when you take control of, well, it's really hard to start at one spot with it, other than the fact that they came in and they took parental rights away to discipline our children. I mean, some parents was actually scared to take their children to hospitals.
Because they'll be examined and they'll say,
yeah, and they're saying
abuse.
that it's some form of abuse. But the very fact that DSS made things worse. Those children went into some foster homes and they just ran away.
And you're a foster parent too.
Yes, I'm a foster parent. And they lived in the streets. They learned street, and they brought in other children into their street life as well. But the main piece is that parents lost a lot there. They were afraid to say anything to their children. Then you got, on the other hand, I have had several foster children in my home, and they were taken from their parents because of some form of abuse or being hit or whatever. And I asked them, well, where did you find this out at? They said, my principal in school, or my teacher in gym, or what?
I think I mentioned to you earlier that there was a young man in our church who called DSS because his mother slapped him.
Yes.
I mean, the mother is a sweet, gentle lady, and she gave him a little backhand in the head. Probably needed it. Okay, well, you say that, and of course, automatically you're suspect of being an abuse. And now she's under investigation.
51A.
And somebody told him to do that. Now, my parents hit me on very rare occasions. When they did, I usually did something that deserved it.
Exactly.
And the last person I'd call, or the last thing I'd call, was DSS. I'd be so ashamed and embarrassed. And of course, there are legitimate cases where there is abuse, and yes, the state, the DSS, should come in. But this seems to be so many cases. I mean, a little backhand to the head, and the kid calls up 800, probably an 800 number,
right?
And automatically that woman is guilty until proven innocent.
The child is snatched away from your home. You see, when I was a homeless woman at one time too, and I often wonder why God allowed that to happen to me. And when I realized that after coming back and going through some of the things that I've been through, you know, and I realized what I learned during that period of time, I learned that it wasn't happening like that in the white communities. It was only happening like that in the black communities. And this was a problem for me. And had I not been homeless and able to see what happened, I would have never known that this is something different from what was happening in the suburban areas.
The old expression, you can't see the forest because the trees are in the way. You were outside of the forest and you were able
and I was able to peek through and find out something that I probably ordinarily wouldn't have found out if I hadn't been a homeless mother.
Isn't that interesting?
You know? And so I always thank God for everything that has happened in my life that has made me a little bit wiser and have a little bit clearer understanding of the world.
Even some of the things that we think are bad, sometimes they're for our
good of an evil, it's called. Right.
Yeah. Parental rights bill. You ladies were very much involved in that. That was passed, and it was the version was watered down. Even a watered-down version, the opposition was tremendous to it. So give us a little background. We have 5 minutes left. Give us a little background on that, if you could.
I'm so proud of all the parents that came from all over Massachusetts.
And this wasn't just it was all over Massachusetts.
Yes. Yeah. And that we still have parents, and parents that are what I call wimpy parents. Wimpy parents let their children run the household, and every other agency and you know, to come into their home. But the parents that were there with us, they stood their ground. They said, "We are these children's parents."
That's right.
We got all kind of opposition, like you have no right to tell them that they can't come in at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. That we were being told so often about what we didn't have a right to do, but we still knew that we were parents, and so we were able to stand our ground. And you know, you don't lose all the battles. You know, you just stay in touch. That's what we do, because we know another battle is coming. We go away, but we'll come back and fight another day.
You win one
because
battle,
we
they've got
are,
3 more
we are,
raisins.
we are these children's parents, and we feel
Right.
very responsible for their lives, no matter what anybody says.
Exactly.
You know.
And we really went with the Parents' Rights Organization with Brian Kammacher. And Rita Haywood, all of us, we network. And we were all concerned about the homosexual agendas or curriculums being implemented and how they would be implemented. Let's just say sexual agendas. Now, in my eyesight,
in Framingham,
the first agenda there is heterosexual. That's the first one. That's the one that God laid out for all of us.
Yes.
And so I always say, you know, start off with the heterosexual, 5 reasons why you marry, and then other lifestyles. This is what the Parents' Bill of Rights is about.
And it was a very modest, it wasn't even a very simple request, really.
It's a simple request. You know, there are people with other lifestyles out there other than the heterosexual relationship. But, you know, if they're talking about how they're being treated, let's implement the golden rule.
Right, correct. And I would agree with that.
You know what I'm saying? Let's implement. Every child in America should know what the golden rule is. And every grown-up coming up will grow up with that.
We do not need,
we don't need the sodomy laws changed. We don't need none of that. I wouldn't want to walk down the street as an adult and see 2 individuals of the same sex having open sex in the streets.
Here in Framingham, they had this homosexual survey that was passed out to some students, and that was about a year ago, and as bad as that was, in the Northborough, which is a little bit west of us, it was passed out in a history class, and that one, I was going to read some of them today, but they were so repulsive, I don't even want to read them. History class, 15-year-olds. You know, it's not just happening in inner cities, it's happening all over the country. Well, we have only about a minute left, and so what I'd like to do, since this program will be airing in Boston sooner or later, and other communities around New England, you have an address or a phone number so people would like to get in touch, some more mad mothers would like to get in touch with you?
Oh, yeah, we have
a mad fathers.
Yes, oh, yeah, we have, it's actually Mad Mass Mothers and Fathers Network on Educational Reform.
Is there a phone number or
yes, we
an
do.
address?
We have a number, 442-3355.
442-3355. 617, that's right in Boston.
617.
And of course, at the end of this program, there's also an address and my office number, so I'd be happy to put you in touch with
thank you.
these wonderful people. Well, thank you, ladies, for coming on, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime in the near future.
Love to.
And thank you for tuning in.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His